Hi, everyone. This is Yuri Rashkin and Andy Jorgensen, and we're going to speak, first of all, in English. I know many people expect me to speak in Russian exclusively, but I swear we can do this in English as well, and I'm really excited actually to be doing this conversation in English because I think it's really important. Andy, thank you for joining me. So what we're going to try to do here is, Andy, I'm going to give them the reins of this, control this to you. And let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about Russia. And you just ask me questions or tell me what you think. And, let's see where we get.
All right. Well, let me just introduce myself a little bit. Yuri, they say that the camera adds 20 pounds. I can see that that's true. But if we do something about it, adding some hair, that would be nice. I'm looking at myself. It's torture, but I'm gonna do it. Yuri and I are good friends, and we talk about things offline. Yuri's doing what he's doing with his live streams and in Russian and talking about some of the things that are happening, the devastation in Ukraine with the Putin war going on, and I just have a lot of questions, like most people I know. And I'm not saying you're going to get the answers here, but we're going to try. And because I don't think anybody has truly the answers of what is going to be like moving forward, what we can expect. We all have guesses. We're going to have some tonight. I'm a former legislator, so we're going to talk a little politics. Last night was the State of the Union address. I've got some thoughts on that. I think it's directly connected to what's happening in Ukraine. And I have some criticism and some thoughts, but having been a former legislator, just want to be a full disclosure. What I do now is I work on behalf of a union trades, the bricklayers here in Wisconsin, and I talk a lot about the benefits of unions and being a union bricklayer and how your life can be so much better. So on any of this stuff you're about to hear tonight, whether it's about Putin, about the State of the Union, about bricklaying, message us, and we'd love to talk offline and hear what you think about what you're about to hear tonight. But it's going to be a lot of honest questions. And Yuri, I will get started with those questions. You are talking to a lot of people that do hail from Russia, may have connections with Russia, speak Russian, as you alluded to. What do you think the common sentiment is amongst people that are watching what's going on, either right there or from afar? But if they have a Russian connection, what's going through their mind right now? What kind of questions and concerns do they have?
Well, thank you, Andy. I think what we're looking at are, first of all, different perspectives. And when we look at the Russian audience and Russian folks that are looking from Russia at the situation, for the most part, they are, and more every day, they're fed only government propaganda, which means that they think that their country up until now has been engaged in this special operation that was going to denazify, demilitarize their neighboring country that they have huge, strong relations with. And everything is going kind of okay, I guess. So that's point of view for a lot of people. There are some people who are seeing that things are wrong. They understand what's going on. They are connected to the internet. They pay attention to other news sources, and they are extremely concerned because the situation is actually dreadful for Russia right now, as it is for Ukraine. But just to focus for a second on Russia, we are basically decided to nuke their economy. And this is going to have amazing fallout that's going to be a little bit long lasting. And it's difficult to understand because when bombs are dropping, like we see in Ukraine right now, it's hard to care about other problems. But they're looking at a very difficult future because what they thought was never going to happen, it did. And at some point, the West, the lines have been crossed as the border of Ukraine, and the response, Putin did not anticipate this at all. And so now we're, looking at this fallout of that.
Yuri, could I ask you, can we go back a little bit? Putin has had, his tussles with Ukraine before. And one of the things is Crimea. And that was on the watch of Obama, if I'm not mistaken, and then Trump. If you can walk us through how that happened, because there's a lot of blame that's going on that, and I just wanted to know, your thoughts on it. If you can give us the facts of how we got here and how Crimea was annexed, is one of the words used, by Russia, and how that happened, and if there is any blame, who should we be pointing that at?
It's easy, because as far as blame, and that's a big conversation, because there's blame versus responsibility versus accountability, all of those kinds of things. But Vladimir Putin seems to have been the person driving this train consistently for over 20 years. So thank you for the question about Crimea, because it is extremely crucial, because Ukrainians rightly remind everybody that the war was not started when Putin crossed the border this time. It started with annexation of Crimea in 2014. So what was happening at the time is that Ukraine was having a revolution. Its Kremlin appointed, purchased politician wanted to say, we're not going to go west. He wanted to go back to Putin. The people of Ukraine said no. They had a revolution. During that revolution, it's as if your neighbor's house was on fire, and Putin ran in, grabbed Crimea, and ran out. So that was his response to seeing that there was a difficult situation next door. In a way, that turned out to be, I think, a huge trap for Putin, and because he fell into this thinking that this was an easy success. And because Ukraine was in no condition to show resistance, he decided that if he did this again, then that he was going to be more successful, even though there were, very mixed results along the way. And he's been kind of fighting this stagnant war for 8 years. He was under the impression that as soon as he would enter now his troops, that they would be greeted as, remember this expression, as liberators, with flowers, and that would be, and it failed. And that part of the plan, again, has been a dismal failure. But since 2014, it's been a very mixed situation, because in the view of many Ukrainians and people who were supporting Ukraine, United States and the West has been very reluctant to be very strongly in support of Ukraine, because that would mean really kind of pissing off Vladimir Putin. And that came with consequences that Western democracies, who are acutely attuned to wishes of their voters, were not willing to deal with for political reasons. And so they were kind of trying to find some way. And actually what, as I recall, is under Obama, we had a pretty aggressive response. And President Obama actually said, as I recall, his last State of the Union, that Russian economy is in shambles. It was a nice statement. It could have gone further. But then we had 4 years of Trump, who was basically like Putin's assistant. So just there was, at best, we still had NATO by the time Trump left White House. So, and then since then, Putin has done the incredible by, unifying the world. I mean, he and Joe Biden together, for kind of different teams, but the threat of Putin, which is, showing itself loud and clear right now, has been very clearly realized. And it's taken a while, because there's this whole feeling of, is this like 1930s where we were appeasing Germany, and this is something that we should have been, stronger right off the bat. But if you think about it, we could be on a doorstep of World War III situation. And honestly, I'm in no rush to get into it. And the fact that we could have been here in 2014, but we didn't, and we had 8 years, that's not bad. It has its advantages.
If you think about the Trump administration, that was why then President Trump was impeached, is because he was holding over the sword of Damocles over President Zelensky there was aid that was being held up by President Trump for him to dig up dirt on what would be his political opponent, Joe Biden. And there was aid going to be passed by Congress, but was held up for political favors. We also got to remember that. But as far as blame goes, I think, I don't remember everything. I don't remember getting up this morning, but President Obama was giving weapons to Ukraine to protect themselves. after that annexation, invasion.
They were holding off on lethal aid. That was a big disagreement because Obama administration was providing humanitarian aid, but actually military aid, because on that level, we can say that if Ukrainian army was able to repel, with the weapons they have today 8 years ago, then maybe we wouldn't have had this conflict today. Right. So it depends on the circumstances, but so they are in a good, better position now, because for 4 years, I think if this happened on Trump's watch, he would be, we would be getting arms to Russia right now. So
I snicker at that, but you may be absolutely correct. There's some sort of a connection between our former president and dictator Putin. I don't know exactly what it is. I think there's a yearning by then President Trump to have the powers, if you will, that Putin has, that he wanted those too. There's such corrupt, evil, dangerous powers to have. Oh my gosh, but who would ever want them? But I think he did. You're right. We'll have to guess, and we can probably make a pretty good one as to what it would be like if we were now in the second term of President Trump. But we're not. And my question to you is, do the guests that you have, the people you talk to from all over the world, do they think that America is doing enough? Are they happy with what we are doing and how we're doing it? Because I too have questions about that, but let me just ask you, what's the sentiment, if you can put your finger on it, as to how people are feeling about America's position and what's going on?
I think it would be fair to say that people who have the strongest opinion about this live in Ukraine. And they can't say enough for the help that they've already received, but if we could do more, they will gladly take it. Right now, I think the concern is that once we have, if we send American troops and we have interaction between American and Russian troops, then we have two nuclear countries going head to head. That's basically definition of World War III. So on that level, I think we are actually finding really an important partnership. I've been involved in so many projects where, it takes different people bringing different things to the table. And sometimes certain people have resources and certain people have to do the work. And in this case, we have, Ukrainians who are doing the work, but we're sending the resources. And it's working out really actually quite encouragingly, because what Ukrainians have, and this is, such an interesting experience, because we just saw Afghanistan, right? And that's been such a painful experience for everybody. And Ukrainians really have a lot of fighting spirit. They really are concerned about this land as their land, and they don't want to give it up, and they don't want to be Russia. Russia has such a that reputation is getting worse, and it's definitely something. But as far as just a couple of words about our former president, just to remember to kick that dead horse a little, we just as a topic is we just right now it's really nice to see the bipartisan sentiment, how everybody's come together, Republicans and Democrats, and in this just rejection of evil that we see that is Putin's regime. And the Ukrainians have a hard time separating all Russians, and sometimes they just hate all Russians because if it's if their people are being killed, they have a hard time separating. But I think most people are still able to separate Russian people from the evil regime, and we have to stick with it. I think it's a wonderful moment on that, because I really like people coming together. And I think that no one's going to forget how Trump and Putin, what they did in Helsinki. Those scary images are part of history. And I think that it's interesting because Trump still has an impossibly difficult time saying anything bad about Vladimir Putin. I think the last we've heard of him, Trump, he was starting to praise Ukrainian people, but he still can't say anything bad about Putin. And that is an important point. Being able to verbally say something bad about Putin apparently matters. So, screw him.
There's so many questions I have out of that. I think one, I'll just keep it on the subject we're talking about, that we are two nuclear superpowers, Russia and America. And the thought is this, Yuri, that we don't go over there with boots on the ground or with our Air Force or something else to crank it up a notch, because that would create World War III. I don't know. But Putin knows that we're supplying the Ukrainians with the weapons to create havoc for him, to have it not been so easy. So the cat is out of the bag. So I don't understand what's the difference between, doing it this way. He knows who's to blame. He knows we're involved. We're not keeping it a secret. If it is, it's the worst kept secret ever. So I'm really confused as to what's the difference between helping Ukraine out here, take this here, use this weapon here, we'll give you some intelligence on the Russians on this, and he knows this is going on. What's the difference between that and just going all out over there? And for that convoy, for instance, I look at that and I say, well, America and its Air Force, I am pretty sure how they would take care of that. Why aren't we? To me, I'm a little hung up on why, if going over there all out, would people say, well, Putin's going to push the button. How come he already hasn't done that? Because he knows we're already helping in his mind, his enemy. Can you explain that difference, if there is one?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think there's the level of our involvement, and there's readiness of Putin to press the red button. I think it's levels as far as level of our involvement. It's been just amazing to watch. I don't even know what the word is to describe it, because currently, last number I heard is that there's 16,000 volunteer foreign fighters in Ukraine, from just like all over the place. And then I heard an announcement from the Russian Ministry of Defense saying that if you're a foreign fighter caught in Ukraine, then Geneva Convention rules are not applicable to you. And then before that, I see an article in Military Times explaining to people how to get involved if they choose to. So this is not a simple situation. And it is, in a way, something that Putin knows so much about, because what you're describing is a hybrid war, which is when you're doing this thing, but you're not saying you're doing it, and you're kind of doing it, but it's unclear. And that's been the climate and the environment in which Putin has thrived, is unclear. It's that muddy the waters, and then who knows what happens. And the fact that we've been fighting this with like radical transparency by exposing his plans and provocations has been just so amazing to watch, because it really it was a lesson that we learned after 2014. Apparently, we had the intelligence and we didn't use it, United States. But this time we decided to reveal the plans, and it just made the whole thing look so staged and obvious. And it's just like so obvious who is acting here and who is at fault. So that's so the hybrid warfare is it is what it is. And if it's really in the end Putin's decision when he feels either threatened enough, or that he needs to show that he is strong enough or crazy enough to go to escalate it to the next level. The next level, unfortunately, is likely to be a nuclear weapon, potentially, in his mind, that he could scare the West with. Apparently, in Kremlin's planner's mind, from what I am understanding from my conversations with people who are supposed to know these things, there's different levels of nuclear weapons, and some of them you can even send soldiers through like an hour later, and apparently the soldiers are presumed to be able to go through this, although Russian soldiers are running away right now and disabling their own tanks so they could surrender, because Ukrainians are now starting to turn over. They have so many Russians surrendering that they're sending, they're letting people in Russia know that if you come and pick up your relative, you can just take them back, just sign here saying that they're not going to go back and fight, because there's just so many people who are being captured. So at what point Putin feels that this is not going well is a good question. If he uses something on Ukraine, does that mean that the West is going to get engaged, because this is not a NATO country, but could be potentially nuclear weapon. But on the other hand, it doesn't have to be a nuclear weapon. It could be like a really bad bomb that sucks up the air and just destroys things, but is not necessarily radioactive. Does it mean that the West is going to react in any predictable way? We are not in a predictable situation. So
Yuri, let me ask you, do you believe, and to the people you've talked to, either in Russia or have connections with Russia, do they believe that Putin has committed war crimes thus far?
What do you mean by war crimes?
Has he crossed over the line? Has he used weapons? Has he gone to a civilian, killed civilians and not gone after strongholds and the rules for war? Has he broken those in most people's minds at this time? And some of the things that he's already done thus far in Ukraine.
I think it is very obvious that he has done those things because it's a great question. But we live in in the 21st century, and the amount of video that is being thrown, I think, at anybody who wishes to look for evidence of it, and their photographs, and it's just so terrible because it is absolute indiscriminate. And I'm not even sure, honestly, here's my benefit of the doubt. I don't know if they're aiming at residential areas or if they're absolutely atrocious at aiming. I think it's frankly both. And they're indiscriminately shooting in a general direction because Putin's way has been to first try the quickie. If the quickie doesn't work, then he goes and he like irons things out. And he did this in Chechnya with the city of Grozny. That was their capital that was leveled to dust. And he did it in Syria with Aleppo. And in a way, this is a surprise because apparently he could do it in all those places. But in Ukraine, the world said no. Can you imagine Putin's surprise? Because he's just been doing things his way, claiming those as victories when there's like nothing but sand is left. But now the world is saying no, and we'll see, because with all those weapons, this is a different situation than was in Chechnya, than was in Syria. The Ukrainians are really fighting back, and their skies are still not. I think there was a fear expectation that Russia will control Ukrainian skies. That is apparently, as I understand, is still not the case. It's been just incredible to watch.
Putin would like you to believe that Ukraine, it was always a part of Russia, still is a part of Russia, is not their own country. Can you explain to us just how ludicrous that statement is?
Just very briefly, because if anything, it's Russia that came out of Ukraine, because it used to be Kiev and Rus, and then there was no Moscow, and then was a village, then it became a something and it grew. But historically, it is just inaccurate. And it's kind of the evil thing of what Putin is trying to do, because it would be absolutely fair for two historians to sit at a discussion and say, well, I believe this, and then I have some evidence, and then the other person says, well, no, and this is very different. And we go, well, it's interesting theories. Who knows? It's history. But Putin is using this as a justification for terrible crimes against, like you described, against humanity. And that is, first of all, it's misuse of history. I think anybody who knows anything about history would be offended, because it's a typical approach of at least Putin, but he's not the first one to invent it, is using history to justify their own actions. And it makes history look bad. It makes politicians look bad, and ultimately people that don't stand up to it suffer consequences of it, and that's a terrible problem.
So I asked you the question, and they say you're supposed to never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. So I was pretty sure you were going to say that Putin has committed war crimes. So and you also talk about him getting threatened. If we actually put boots on the ground, if we actually sent our Air Force over to take matter into their hands, this would be a threat to Putin. He's already, the thought that he's committed war crimes tells me that there's no going back to the way things were for him. That's not an option anymore. So as we talk about him feeling threatened, that's going to go through his mind. I want to ask you, Yuri, what are some of the consequences he must think about as he gets this label as someone who has committed war crimes. What do his people think about it? Because I'm amazed at the crowds that are growing in Russia, and they're risking going to jail to protest over there. Now, you've been there when that's happened. Physically, you've been there, and I'd like you to touch on that too and what that was like. But there are it feels like things are just tightening in all around him. Yes, there's the pressure we're putting on, but his own people are putting it on too. There's pressure from who want to do business with him because they need them. They want the economy, the money that comes from that. They're backing away. Germany we all were wondering how they were going to handle this. They've made a hard stance on this. It looks like Boris Johnson is now starting to talk about the oligarchs that a bunch of them, it sounds like, Yuri, hang out in England and maybe in for a little knock on their door on some of the things. And there's questions about that too, that he's giving them way too much time to actually get going on that. And they can put some affairs in order to hide things or escape. But nonetheless,
the yachts are on the move. I hear the yachts are on the move.
The yachts are on the move. All of these pressures and many, many more. This is a tip of the iceberg in his mind as he feels more and more threatened and gets closer to that button, God forbid. What consequences does he envision will happen? And what does he fear the most?
All right. Well, Andy, you threw a lot at me there, so I'm just gonna try to do the best I can.
Asked my wife. I do that. I load it up.
That's awesome.
Pick it apart. Have at it as you will. But yeah, Putin. What must be going through his mind? We're worried about the threat that we would give if we went all out. There's plenty of threats for him right now.
So here's what
does he fear his people the most?
No. The Russian people. They've proven themselves over and over to be depressingly obedient to power. It's very unfortunate, but that's a separate topic that I will get to that actually next. But first, I think that here's the thing.
Don't discount that. I mean, if it rise up, Yuri, in the numbers, that has
good. Yes, there's enough people. You would think that there would be 140 million people that could take on one guy if they decided that he was the problem. But they don't even seem to agree that he is the problem. So that's a problem too.
I heard one Russian talk about, I'm protesting because that means then I'm keeping people here. They can't go into Ukraine and invade them. They'll have to stay here and deal with me and the other people that are protesting.
I think, it's an interesting thing because people are doing it for their own consciousness. I think out of their own sense of to protect their own, almost for the soul. I don't know how else to explain it because there's punishment for people that are doing this, very likely, but they can't help themselves. It's, I'm sorry, if Wisconsin went to war against Illinois, there would be a lot of people very distraught because we'd have families all over across the border. It would be just what are we doing here? Well, but our governor is those Illinoisans, man, I'm going to solve this Illinois problem once and for all. That'd just be insane. But the thing with Putin is that he's been there for a long time and unchecked by elections, which are extremely crucial. Everybody vote if you can, please. And what he's been what he likes, besides apparently playing soldiers and risk kind of games, is to have okay, how do I say this? So this is a story that I heard from a journalist who deals with people who prepare reports for Putin. And what he was told is that people who prepare reports for Putin, because Putin doesn't even go online, they've learned long ago that if they give Putin the information Putin doesn't like, it's not good. So they've been trained to give him the information that he likes. And that means that he is misinformed by his own, requirements.
I heard there was somebody else, another leader that was kind of like that.
It's always a problem when we have people who are first don't rely on expertise but rely on loyalty, and then who are uncontrolled in power because they're just there over and over. And so what Putin apparently wanted is, check this out, an easy plan to defeat the United States. And so they created one for him. and you'll be shocked. And I don't even know how to describe it, but here, the easy plan to defeat the United States is not our military bases, our metropolises, that's not even the easiest way, apparently. Apparently, the easiest way to defeat the United States is you shoot nukes at San Andreas Fault and the Yellowstone super volcano. And if you can get those things going, then the whole, you got America done. It's crazy, but it's a plan.
Wow. I hadn't heard that one. Feel you'll have heard everything by now. I didn't ever.
It's incredible what, comes out if you speak, I think in this case, Russian, but like the person that reported this to me is himself. This is the problem, is people will say, well, this guy is a KGB plant. I go, I don't know this. I'm saying this is a story that I've not heard before. He seems to be reasonably well connected. Let's investigate, but it's an, how do I say, whether sometimes people will say that these stories are being put out to scare people. And to, because one of the strategies of Putin is to show how crazy he is, because if he's crazy, we have to deal with him somehow. Instead of he is just a coward who is bluffing, who's got no army that's capable of warfare. He's a paper tiger. It's really kind of silly, not to mention he's got himself totally exposed to China right now. He has to beg them not to come in and invade because, it's right there. 75% of his army is supposed to be in, taking over Ukraine. So he's got some really bad planning, and he seems to have absolutely no care for his people, because there's thousands of our Russian troops that are being killed there every day. It's nuts. Now, with the oligarchs, it's really interesting because we're pushing through on this, and President Biden is in his speech said some fantastic things about that. And I really, really was encouraged by everything he said. But today, I saw in, I think British press were saying that, well, maybe it's not going to be quite as easy to take stuff away from oligarchs as we thought. I mean, honestly, there has to be laws. We can't just yank stuff from people. So I kind of understand that. But to be fair, if we considering the nuclear things we have done to Russia, they can take all the money from all those oligarchs. It's really not going to help them, and if there's because of this whole country collapses and there's into ashes, economically speaking, and you have, a handful of people who are wealthy, who are standing outside, well, whatever, that's their problem. I mean, it's just a whole different level of calamity at that point. As far as Russia being right now, I swear, I think it's being canceled. I think just the whole country, the cancel culture is showing itself in a most bizarre, unexpected way, because nobody wants to do business with Russia. All these companies are leaving. There's a long list of corporations that are leaving. Last I heard, Coca-Cola and Burger King were saying they're going to stay for now, but, we'll see how the day is young. So, or day is long. So we'll see. But it's just an exodus, which means that their economy is going to collapse because there'd be no market. They're sitting on the business news channel where I've done some commentary from time to time. I check them out to see what they're talking about. They're like CNBC, and they're like, I don't know, there's not going to be much economy to discuss, because what's business? There's no business. So that means that, what are they going to be, communists now? That means that everybody has to work for the state, I guess, and state has to print money. So it's just a crazy situation.
Yeah, and I've heard that the dire straits that the Russian economy is in, this is coming to a surprise to many Russians. They are feeling the effects of it, but they're understanding how they got there. You mentioned all the propaganda, and they're so confused as to what to believe, what not to believe, but they aren't hearing why this is happening. That they're not able to get money out of the ATM or whatever it may be. Are you hearing that too? That the people themselves, depending on what they subscribe to listen to, they're not being told why we're at this point?
This is where the classic Russian instinct, I think, kicks in, I suspect, because when I was growing up.
Tell me more.
In Soviet Union, if you saw a line, you just get into line, because that means that there's something that they're going to have at the end of the line. So I think it's that kind of a situation, and it's the level of ruble is shifting. They haven't even opened their stock market in days, so it's just a big head scratching. I mean, We thought we're headed bad in 2008. This is worse. I want to address, we got some comments from people. Danette Renish is, bless your heart, is writing with questions. She's saying, first of all, what can we do to help Ukrainians on a personal level? There is a list of links that I put together with help from a couple of people that I'm going to put in description to this video.
Great.
But right. And
thank you for that question too. That's a great question.
Yep.
I think everybody has thought about that at some point during all of this.
And it's interesting because people can go in different directions, because some people want to help with humanitarian aids and some people want to help Ukrainian army. And there's different, links, different directions to go. And there's a link to help kids that are left orphans because their parents died defending their country. So there's, just whatever you feel is most right for you is the right way to do it. Then Danette asked another question. We agreed to give Ukraine weapons and help, but it seems like we're doing as little as possible. Andy, you brought up this point too, and I think that there's a point where it's really, Putin became basically Hitler of 21st century just like that when he crossed that border. And I'm afraid that if we're going to put our boots on the ground and get involved and lead to beginning of World War III, even though lots of people in Ukraine will say that World War III really has started. We really are in it. This is just, the beginning, because it will inevitably lead to, if Putin gets what he wants, he will march on, because at this point, all pretenses are off. When they shut off those media outlets in Russia, that told me that they're stopped pretending to be nice. And that means that if Ukraine works, they can go to Moldova. If Moldova falls, they can go to Baltic states. If Baltic states is NATO, I mean, it's at some point, he basically lost it. The good thing here is this. He's a paper tiger. He's got no troops to actually occupy anything because he's spread thin. He's got logistic problems, which, and this whole thing could run out of gas. So,
I want to stop there because that's a great place. That 40-mile, I said 40-mile. At one point, I thought, they must have got that wrong, 4-mile. No, 40-mile convoy that is headed toward Kyiv is stopping, starting, stalling. What are you hearing? What's the status of that convoy, Yuri? Is it running out of gas? Is it stumbling along, or are they stopping and starting for strategic reasons? What do most people think?
I'm not following it minute by minute, but my understanding was the convoy had a lot more soldiers than artillery per se. So it's not exactly clear what they're trying to set up on that level, but it's been his generals have designed a lot of plans for him. And things that have been in his control, like taking over Belarus and turning that into basically an extension of Russia, has been working very well, because like in Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, they just passed a referendum that was framed. The dictators always want to have like as many people that they can blame for this decision as they possibly can. Referendum to allow nuclear weapons into Belarus, which means that now the Russians can legally, Putin is very hung up on legalities. So when he is like, whatever happens to him, it has to be very legal at the end. Now he can bring nuclear weapons into Belarus and blackmail Europe. Europe is, rightfully very concerned.
Wow. Yeah, this 40-mile convoy, I've heard that this is crucial because while it is a threat, it is also, regardless what Putin may think, it's a target. It's a long target. And that's why, in my mind, what could America do? I just envision that our Air Force could take care of that.
Oh, the things we could do. It's
because of that threat and the red button thing, I guess that's not being done. But I think tactically we could be giving, and I hope we are giving the Ukrainians a couple of things. The weapons to thwart that convoy, because I think a lot hinges on them reaching their destination and fulfilling what that convoy is going to do, whatever is on paper in Russia for the plans of it. but also giving them advice and information on what they can, how they should approach that, what they should do to take care of it. It's my hope that that's going on, but I keep going back to, all right, we're doing all of this. Putin knows we're doing all this. Why isn't that a threat comparable to just going in there and helping Ukraine defend themselves? What's the difference? I know I keep asking that question because it's one that I think should have been broached last night in the State of the Union.
Just as far as the line that's been sold to Russian people is that they are fighting Americans. So as far as like Russian soldiers are concerned, they think that they might even encounter Americans there. And then Ukrainians are being told that Americans are bombing you. I mean, the level of disinformation and blaming everything on us anyway is already occurring. So on that level, who cares? Just had a thought on all of this that is escaping for the
join the club. This is just you and I talking. This happens quite a bit, folks.
Right. Okay. So a couple of things because we have comments here from. I know this is great. Oh yes. So first of all, this is important. Where is Putin right now? Right.
Oh yeah. Where is he?
Where is he? Well, he's not in Kremlin. Sorry. And that seems to be I think probably one thing that everybody agrees on. Where he apparently most likely is right now is inside Mountain Yamantau, located at like Altai region.
That was my second guess.
Right, exactly. He's like hours away in a mountain bunker. And people are like, what's the difference between a bunker and a bomb shelter? I think it's a strength thing because when you have a leader, dictator, he has to be like in a bunker because people, are hiding in a bomb shelter, even though he's, whatever. But it's supposed to be very nice, size of like very large, like people can live there. It's how do I say? Settlement, like a type of a size of a settlement. I can't even imagine what that is, but it's inside a mountain. It just sounds very James Bondian, doesn't it?
I was just going to say the same thing. Yes, it does. Does he have a white cat, Yuri? Does he pet it a lot?
Right, I don't know, but it's just crazy, right?
It is.
And then,
now, how do you know this? Where are you getting this information from?
This is the information that comes out. How do I say? It's there's a few journalists that have connections that are talking about this, and I have the access through YouTube by seeing them on other channels or seeing them on Facebook. Then I invite them on my channel and I talk to them and I ask them questions and I learn these things. And then, this is why I appreciate your asking me this in English, because now I can like share this information in English. I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. Now, for one thing here that Becky Strupp asked, and thank you, Becky, for watching, what about the Budapest Memorandum? And that's really important because...
This is a new one for me. What is the Budapest Memorandum?
Budapest Memorandum is another very important piece of the legal document that was signed, I'm trying to think, I think 1994, and in exchange for surrendering and turning over its nuclear weapons, Ukraine was going to get protection of its borders from all the Western powers. We are seeing now, and since 2014, Ukrainians have been pointing at that memorandum saying, what about this? What about this? And to be fair, we're not talking about just Crimea. There's also a couple of cities that Russian separatists were able to occupy, and with support of Russian troops, that's what was used for provocation. So there is the like Donbas region, and then there's Crimea. But Budapest Memorandum has been something that's been pointed at for years. Because on some level we have legal, like if we decide to do this, we have, I suppose, like I'm not an attorney and I don't want to play one on Facebook, but we have a legal obligation, according to at least one document, to support Ukraine militarily. So, in the end, do we choose to exercise it because that might like be superseded by World War III? So it's a variation on an interesting topic. And The problem is ultimately is Russia, because Russia doesn't abide by any treatments, by any agreements, doesn't see, like right now they're dealing with negotiators. And when Putin told Macron that he was not going to invade and then he did invade, I think that was the last time that very clearly indicated to everybody that you can't talk to Putin. I have this theory that when there's some kind of a peace dealio that's reached, it's not even going to be with Putin. It's going to be with whoever's after Putin, because he's just so painting himself into a corner that we can't even talk to him. We can't trust him. So I think that there's a really big problem, trust that he's created. And that's, that's been his trademark, because in a country where you have corruption, where you don't have people following rules, you lose trust. And then you gain by trust, you die by trust, by lack of it.
We talked about the Budapest Memorandum. There's also a story out there about becoming a member of NATO, that Ukraine had its chance to have that happen. But it's my understanding is someone threw that out there on social media. Well, they had their chance and they said no. Then I looked into it. It sounds like when that shill was in there from Russia being their president, that's when that happened. Am I right on that? Or am I mixed up on that?
I gotta say, no? This is something that really doesn't come up too often, in a sense that it is the common understanding that Ukraine always been trying to be in NATO, and that was not something that they were able to control. Like they wanted to, and then because it has to be unanimous, they haven't been able to. The problem also since 2014 was that they were technically at war, really, and NATO doesn't accept members who are at war. So in a way, that's been another incentive for Putin to keep that conflict war going, because that means that Ukraine couldn't officially join NATO. So it's been kind of, at least since 2014, really out of their control. And up until then, the country has made an amazing leap, as what I'm observing, since the Maidan revolution, where they really just finally came together as a national consciousness and realized that they want to be a European country, and that their whole identity, it's amazing, the national identity, it was built on resisting Putin's aggression since 2014, because in these countries such as Russia and Ukraine, people's nationality plays an extremely important part. Oh, you're an Uzbek, well, then you're forever an Uzbek. Oh, you're a Jew, you're forever a Jew. Then you're like being separated always. And what Putin did is he brought everybody in Ukraine together, and they consider themselves Ukrainian. And that's something that is what part of this battle spirit that they're showing now. So it's an interesting process.
So can you help me out here? Hopefully you know the answer to this question. Who was the puppet that was there before President Zelensky?
There was actually, before President Zelensky, there was President Poroshenko, who had his flaws, but as far as I can tell, did a fine job during the actual war of 2014 and 15 when he was elected. He's a chocolate millionaire. And his businesses were at risk, and he agreed to be the president of Free Ukraine, whatever. And I think if he did his job, and then somebody else became president. That's how democracy works. But before the revolution, 2014, there was this guy named Yanukovych who ran away, and that is apparently very important for leaders. Where did
he run to?
He ran away to Russia. Why? I don't know. Of all the places in this world. Yanukovych took off, but Zelensky stuck around. Zelensky is amazing.
Let's talk about him.
A couple of words. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were telling me off air, because I was talking about, gosh, this guy is a hero. They're going to sing songs about this guy long after he leaves this earth. I truly believe that. But you were saying prior to this, not so great. He's okay, but certainly not what he is now. Is that help us out? This is a guy, stand-up comedian, I understand it, got his own TV show, servant of the people. That's ironic. And now is a guy that is leading how we all imagine a leader should lead. If I'm asking you to go to war, I'm going to be right by your side. We don't see that much anymore, not even in America. But here we're seeing it, and boy, I'll tell you what, it blows me away. But tell us a little bit about some things that you know about President Zelensky.
You know, it's remarkable to see somebody just rise to the moment and blossom at the right under the right circumstances. Because Zelensky, even though he won with 75%, I think, of the vote when he ran for office, which is pretty impressive when you think about it, because he was not the incumbent. And we usually see that incumbents do well, but in this case, people once again want to change, and they brought somebody else in who had no experience in government and was kind of a weak president, as what was seen. I mean, Trump really pushed him around, as you may recall, during that, in the entire first impeachment, as you already brought up. But I mean, he didn't show himself really honestly in the strongest way. He was victim, and the whole country of Ukraine was used, for Trump's personal political purposes. But it's kind of like, okay, well, but whatever. They'll have elections. They'll have somebody else again.
Well, there wasn't much he could do, though, Yuri. Let's be fair. I mean, he needed those weapons being held over his head, and he couldn't come probably out and say what he'd love to have said in his heart of hearts. That wasn't an option because he needed those weapons. So.
That is a dilemma of a leader. Absolutely. Just to, one more thing to say not nice about him is that I remember at some point they found more so-called, I think, either Panama Papers or some other version of ways where the journalists exposed that all these wealthy people had hidden wealth. And in the list somewhere, Zelensky's name even showed up, and he was like, well, everybody's got accounts there. I mean, if you're anything, you got to do so. So he is reasonably, affected by the system. He doesn't walk on water by any means, but he has acted in absolutely the right way to transition into like a semi-biblical character in the last week by basically acting like a leader. And I don't know if that, on some level, I got to say, I think acting training, like Putin underestimated the importance of having a good actor in charge of a country, because Putin himself is a terrible actor. Like when he was trying to project strength, he just looks like pitiful, just pitiful. And Zelensky is actually a pretty decent actor. And the things that he's said, because he's given speeches, I'm sure you've seen, that are so powerful. Interpreters were in tears, interpreting things that Zelensky was saying. I think, honestly, the passion that he's feeling is incredible, but he's also a professional actor. So that was maybe the right person to have at that position. But it's been an amazing connection, because he seems to have charged up Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are, if they weren't fighting, he would be dead by now. So, I mean, it's a really interesting relationship between a leader and people. And it's interesting to me that they're saying that all the parliamentarians in Ukraine, they want them to be with their people. So they're not playing this game of like, okay, we have the central metropolis and then we have everybody else. No, they want to be with their people. And that's been the whole strategy. And again, after Afghanistan, we were ready for something much worse. And then you have a guy who says, I don't need a riot, I need ammunition. Hell yeah. So it was great.
A TV show star becoming president. What could go wrong?
Wait a minute.
Let's talk a little bit about last night,
yes.
The State of the Union address. It was President Biden's first State of the Union address in such tumultuous times, I guess you could say. On a great note, first time that two women were sitting in the chairs behind him as he gave that speech. An exciting time for Americans. We're very proud of that moment, most of us. But, the speech itself, just so everyone knows, this is a president's chance to go through a few things. The challenges we're facing together, the accomplishments thus far that he has had, but, that was being overshadowed by what is happening in Ukraine. And it ought to be. And so there was a question that had to be asked. How is President Biden going to handle this moment? Is he solely going to address what's going on in Ukraine? Is he going to tell us some new things that he is going to do to turn the temperature up? I think he did that with talking about airspace being shut down for or air travel for Americans. That's huge, especially to the oligarchs, and some of that will put another crimp in the hose over there. And that was new. There was some thought maybe he would talk about where we get our oil from. We get, is it 7 or 8% of our oil from Russia? And when you're handing him money for his oil, you are enabling him, you could say, to further his efforts in trying to go to war or take over Ukraine. So maybe that should be dealt with. And I don't think
that's something that, it's something that's always been a little bit in favor of the United States and allowed us to be the leader in this kind of being anti-Russian movement in that sense, because we have less connections with them than Europe does. And so that allowed us the space in which to show more leadership, because as painful and difficult as it may be to get rid of 7 or 8%, it's easier than 30 or 40%. And so for us, but that allows us to show leadership, and that's where being partners and working and with our European partners and allies, and Germany that's building now the liquid hydrogen, whatever it's called, the port, so they could take our liquid gas from the United States, and we're bringing it over there, and everybody working together. I'm telling you, Putin has done an amazing thing. And I mean, he brought Republicans and Democrats together last night. I was so glad. I was wondering how Biden was going to use Putin, and he used him great, because he scored a few really nice points talking about successes of the administration. I mean, there's been plenty of challenges. So I think it's nice to point out that the successes, and it's been fantastic to see that 10-15 minutes was spent on this. I mean, I feel it's an important issue, and I'm glad to see the president recognize that as well. But it's just such a rallying cry for all the right reasons. Here's the thing. We've heard presidents talk about our armed forces before at State of the Union. And I remember President George W. Bush talk about Iraq. And I think that has really, much more than what happened in Afghanistan this past summer, has affected how we feel about what we're supposed to do with our armed forces and what purpose they serve. And that's been really important to understand that we hugely need our armed forces. I love the fact that we have great military, and we need to use them sometimes, and we need to understand that just how do I say, what we said was going to happen in Iraq is that we were going to be greeted as liberators, or what we saw in Afghanistan, where we overthrew the terrorist regime, and then we tried to kind of raise the consciousness and awareness of the people who were being tormented by the terrorist government regime. In this case, we have something entirely different, because we have a country that is standing up for itself and is just asking for more help. Or for help. And so the fact that President brought it up, and he talked about the importance of foreign relations and the important role the United States plays in the world, I think that's exactly the right way to like what we have our resources for is to promote good things, because it is about democracies versus autocracies, and the difference couldn't be clearer than it is today.
I agree with you. I just wanted more of that. And I didn't want a grocery list of all the other things that are going on here, that I know how this works. I've been a part of big speeches that governors have given, and put this in, put this in, put this in. And pretty soon you've got this huge speech that goes this way and that way, when we're in a time where I want it concise. I want to know, I want to understand more. We're having discussions throughout the world on this. I was hoping that the president would help us out as to why we don't have our military having more of a presence, explaining exactly what the threat is. And I get it. You can't say everything. It's like, chess is big in Russia, right, Yuri? So use this analogy. I can't tell you the move. I can't tell you why I'm not taking your rook right now. That would be not the smartest thing in the world. We just had a president that would have no problem telling you, boasting why, I'm really going to get you 2 moves from now. You wait. No, I get it. You can't do that. But I would like to better know. So when I get into a discussion with somebody who says, we're weak or whatever, and they're making those claims, no, you need to give it time. You need to understand why we're not putting boots on the ground. I was hoping that he would explain that a little bit more. It's a great stage to be able to accomplish that. And I think it was a missed opportunity. It was a fine speech, don't get me wrong. And you're right, it started out very good, but then it started to be, okay, now I got to check this box. I talked about this and that. And I was hoping that it could have been so much more. That's all.
I can't argue with you there. And I felt like it was very carefully tested, on what he should speak about, what he shouldn't speak about. But his goal was to unite and to show in the end, he has to say that our union is strong. I mean, I think that's kind of a required line. And so he has to get there somehow. And I think he built it to that point. It would have been very honest of him to, I think, discuss the some of the things you and I talked about. But maybe they're just not the kind of stuff that belongs at State of the Union speech, because it's kind of scary. When you think about how crazy or how calculated or how miscalculated Putin can be, is really State of the Union the time to warn us all that this could be a dangerous time. And this is where I wonder, because I see that we are actually saying that now Putin is bluffing, and now we're saying he's not going to do the nuke thing, and we are actually lowering our level of readiness, which I'm sure can be increased in a matter of seconds, but whatever, we're saying we're lowering our levels. So there is some kind of a, gamesmanship that's going on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about something. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about propaganda, because usually you and I, we feed off each other on this topic alone, and how important it is, because it's here in America. And some people think I'm referring to.
You gotta be. I have good news for you, Andy. They're shutting down RT.
That's what I was going to get to, and that's news. I was going to ask you, what is it going to take? Because, folks, let's back up so everybody knows what we're talking about. But one of the things that Putin relies on, I'm not saying he does it well, but he subscribes to 100%, is propaganda on his people. And then it's like a worst nightmare. Somehow it has been allowed to be on TV systems over here, RT America. That's propaganda coming from the Kremlin. Ever wonder why there wasn't any commercials on there? They didn't need to be. It was paid for by Russia. It was on our American TVs. Tell me how that makes any sense. But now I was going to ask you the question, what's it going to take for our lawmakers? I know we got a First Amendment, but that's propaganda, dangerous propaganda. That
you are so right. But I can't believe how apparently money can make this thing go away, because when Russia all of a sudden run out of money for these kinds of luxuries, now they're shutting it down because nobody wants to deal with them. They don't have money to run this operation. Russia is sitting on like, I guess, $130 billion in gold, and that's it. And they can't even sell it. So there's this.
So when did this happen? When did they pull the plug on RT?
The story that I said is that the staffers are leaving, people are resigning, and they're shutting production down in North America or something. So it would be great. I know people are immediately like, maybe Fox News. We'll see. Tucker Carlson, right, is struggling with advertisers. So yeah.
Well, RT, it was masterfully done in a way, because I remember they had Larry King on. I think they've had former Governor Jesse Ventura have a show on there. There's also, an array of liberal, conservative talking heads that you may have seen on other stations. Ed Schultz, remember him? He was big in going on in Wisconsin. Over 10 years ago, Act 10, when our governor took away the rights of working people in our state. He was a hero that was on, I think, MSNBC at the time, and he camped out here. But then later on, he went over and had his own show on RT and was a sympathizer with President Putin. He's now died since, but that just broke my heart. But that was strategic in doing that. I guess money speaks to someone.
And somebody just, John Jenks, hi, John, wrote, perhaps Fox and Tucker Carlson should be shut down. See, we live in a free country. This is what's amazing. But if they can't pay their bills, they're going to be gone. It's amazing that apparently the sanctions are so powerful. They were not anticipated. Nobody thought that the West would do anything like that. Even the SWIFT that they were talking about, I think SWIFT was like going to be, it was talked about because it would have been like an easy thing to do that would have had a lot of impact. But at this point, we're so much further down or up this sanction escalator that it's just they're shutting down their assets. We're talking, they're losing everything. And with Fox, I don't know. I think with Fox, I'm just hoping that they're going to get the point, that the talking memo, that it's not good to praise Vladimir Putin. It's just a bad idea. It's bad politics. It's bad business. It's bad propaganda. So hopefully they'll see that it's inappropriate, and people that do that kind of stuff will be marginalized, as I feel they should be, because there's a difference between supporting a political leader of another country and being like, marching around in the early 1940s, supporting Führer. There's just, it's a different situation. It's interesting to see that some Russian stores are putting up more Ukrainian flags, and Russian people are dealing with some interesting fallout of this, because they're used to looking down at everybody. Now all of a sudden they're being looked down on because Russia's got a bad rap now. It's interesting too, because there's like Russian writers and artists who are sending letters against the war to Putin, saying this is ruining reputation of Russian culture. Because think about what happened after World War II. People didn't want to speak German. So, this is bad for Russian in every different kind of sense. So
I don't think he cares.
You're right.
But, as far as President Biden goes, it's a balancing act for him, too, because he has those critics coming out of Fox News. And it's just bizarre to hear. Usually in times like this, for people who didn't know, in times of turmoil like this, Americans usually are able to come together. Even though we come from different opinions and thoughts on things, we, in times like this, come together. This is kind of unique a little bit that that's not happening. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out, from the president's own camp, the far left are criticizing his sanctions that he's put on Russia now. They aren't for those. They've also, they may be the reason that he didn't try to cut off buying oil from Russia, that they've got some thoughts on that too, and he was afraid of the criticism that may come from them. So it's coming from all over, and it's such a unique time because, as I say, this is usually a time where we, I think back to 9/11, and I was not a big fan of President Bush, but at a time like that, it's time to put those petty arguments that feel petty at that time aside and be together during times like this, and it just doesn't feel like we're doing that right now.
Well, it's work in progress, but I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. Becky Strop is writing, do you think Putin will enact martial law? Great question, because that's the reason really for the shutdown of all the remainder news outlets, and them ceasing to exist as far as anybody that says anything, just tries to report news, basically. I think tomorrow Putin is scheduled to have a meeting where they're going to enact martial law, and that more than likely. And the situation there is this: for the last week, Russia was spreading this idea that, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, they're conducting a special operation, like a surgery in Ukraine. Turned out the surgery went kind of bad. And so now the news story, that the new narrative, kind of propaganda, back to propaganda that they're going to be spinning, is that it's Russia now against the world. The world decided to attack Russia, and so Russia is against everybody, and we need to be looking for traitors in our midst, which is the next level of hysteria, because you shut down the country and you explain that it's the traitors that are the problem, and you start repressions. They're talking about closing borders. People are leaving on the airplanes to any country they can. Armenia, Georgia, anybody, most countries won't accept Russians. So we're seeing this iron curtain being lowered from all directions. And there's a lot of regular Russians who are terrified of this. And it's a very difficult situation for a lot of people. No question about it. We like to think that we're punishing oligarchs, but we're punishing everybody. And I think part of the reason for that is that the hope is that Russian people will say, you know what? geez, if we just had a different figurehead, maybe the West would stop all of this. But the problem is that people seem to be so far just uniting against their leader and buying into this hysteria of the world decided to attack poor little Russia, and it's going to be really crazy, weird to watch, because like they're not going to have planes really. Apparently most of Russian air fleet is leased, but so they don't have planes. But then they said, no, we're going to nationalize planes. I'm going, what? So they're not going to return the leased planes back to their whatever Irish company that canceled the lease, and they're going to keep planes, but they still don't have parts for those planes. So this is Russia is going to be like become loosely connected. It's going to be strange.
Somebody want me to ask you about a conversation you had on social media with somebody who kind of criticized you for being too harsh on Russia, and that and you asked her what she meant, and she said, well, I have parents still over in Russia. And can you give us a little insight in your answer and where the conversation went from there?
Well, I just feel that yes, it's wonderful that there's brave enough people who are, and I'm afraid of this conversation is just, if it's too late, because I think that protesting is great, but Putin is not going to pay attention. And he's going to do what he's going to do, because Russian people have proved to Putin many times that they're not a threat to him. And so people should leave. If they are able to, they should get out. The submarine is going underneath the water. And
you know a little something about this, don't you, Yuri?
And I do, because my parents, they sold all of our possessions, liquidated everything, gave away the apartment that is worth huge amounts of money, maybe not worth anything again now, but was worth at some points huge amounts of money, because my parents they didn't know that they were going to have this. They didn't want to wait to find out. They just wanted to get out when they could, and they did. And thank you to them for that, because today I can wake up and be like, hey, I'm in America. This is fantastic, because I could have been I could have been in Russia, and I would have been just looking around going, is anything really happening bad? Because life seems to be going the same as it is, but the world has changed. The world has changed, and I am very grateful to my parents, and I wish to people that are able to see this is where we're running into a humanitarian crisis. And this is where I'm also hearing very encouraging stories from people who are people from Russia and Ukraine, who are as often happen to be huge Trump supporters, but are now turning around and setting, I know of this immigration attorney that is like setting up a refugee camp that she's helping to fund in Poland or something. And she's doing services for free, and people are trying to help. And it's like, I just love the fact that whatever we say politically, in the end, our like humanity comes out, and we just go, I got to help people who are in terrible situation, no matter how cruel the ideology that I support claims to be. I'm just not that mean. And I think that's really gives a lot of hope.
Yuri, as we wind down here, are there any more questions that you have being asked?
I guess you're right. We should wrap this up. But Becky wrote, let's see. So can we expect Putin to commit human rights violations against his own people in order to bring them in line? He doesn't even need to bring them in line. The terrible thing is that he can hurt them. This is kind of a North Korean almost situation. He can hurt them and make us feel bad. Like, you see what I'm doing to Russian people? Do you want me to hurt them more? I can do it. It's not very difficult for me, and he's done it again and again, because there was a law that was passed that specifically forbid Americans from adopting children from Russia. And this was done knowing full well that Russian orphans will die. And it was called the law of bastards, because all these lawmakers knew full well and voted for it. So the idea of hurting their own to make others feel pity and be like, well, we got to negotiate with Putin. He's just going to destroy his people. His people don't seem to, I guess they've accepted this. We'll see. I mean, I hope that it really doesn't take everybody. Like, this is the thing that we see in the United States. Not everybody has to be involved in politics for tremendous change to occur. And so if enough people that feel that something needs to get done, that maybe their leader is thinking about pressing the nuclear button, or maybe they and their country are going to be, I don't know how to describe this, but I'm not sure what they'll be eating in the summer and what they'll be, making soups out of. Russia has a very strong forest scavenging culture. They're not so much agrarian as they're forest pickers. This is why, like, mushrooms and berries and things you can find in a forest, that could be in the future. So I mean, it's a very big change, because they've been used to having Western goods for the last 30 years, and now they're just leaping back to the USSR.
Any other questions? Because you can see them.
Thank you, Wilson Leong. Hi, Wilson.
Oh, Wilson
writes, reports from the AP that Russian troops are shelling Europe's largest Zaporozhye nuclear power plant in Ukraine. How do I say? I have no, that it just fits. We don't, I haven't seen that news report, but if it's from AP, we know that's reasonably reliable. So let's presume that it is happening, in a sense that, what do we know from this? It tells me that it means using nuclear weapons is not out of the question, because if you think that you don't have to, like, oh my gosh, we gotta make sure that we don't hit the nuclear plant. And they're not saying that. What other things, that means that there's certain limits that they just don't feel are applicable. They're not scared by certain things. Maybe they think that this is not going to affect them. Maybe they think they live on a different planet. John Jenks writes, will it take one of his own oligarchs to take him out? John, that's a great question.
Well, that goes back to my question. What does he fear the most? Being engulfed by his people, being taken out by an oligarch, being put in handcuffs, being tried? I just wonder what what's his worst nightmare in all of this. And that certainly is an option. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about that. Is it an option, really? Or do you think that's just something we have in our minds, but it really doesn't have a chance?
He's technically hard to catch. He's technically like out of most people's reach. Right now, while the palace coup has traditionally been a favorite way of changing government in Russia, he is relying on a group of bodyguards in his bunker. Now, I saw today on Twitter, some Russian businessman put out a $1 million bounty for Putin's head. Okay, I mean, I think we could crowdsource on this. It could come up with more money, and it would be well worth it. But it's just, I think, physically difficult to do right now. And I'm not sure, Putin is being so paranoid about all these videos and pictures. We see him meeting with people at long tables where they're sitting far away from him. That could mean that maybe he has, for instance, immunocompromised situation, and maybe he has some disease where he's particularly afraid of getting COVID. There could be those kinds of things. So we start to wonder, because it's not democracy. We don't have official White House report on health, although that can say the president weighs 239 pounds when we know he does not. But with Putin, we have no information whatsoever, and he travels with his own porta potty because he's afraid that somebody will get their hands on his, poop. So it's a different level of paranoia. So
I wanted to end this in a good way, but
right?
Yeah. I wanted to end this in a positive note, but now we're talking about Putin's poop.
Right.
Yeah, but those pictures of that table, I don't care how you slice it. It's just paranoia, period. You can say it's COVID. I doubt it. I really think that it's just somebody who's just worried about everybody. This is probably, I don't know this, maybe you do, but I'll bet he has his own food taster too, because he's got to always be looking over his shoulder.
It's the life of a dictator, like, let's hope that you and I, Andy, never find out.
I don't want to. Yeah,
I don't want to either. I think
I really. Let me ask you this, Yuri. I'll tell you where I get my news for on this. I mean, all the typical network news, and I take bits and pieces and listen to some of my favorite podcasts. I have been subscribing to Reddit. I don't know if you get some of your things from there, but they seem to have, and I don't know why this is, but they have raw footage of things happening over in Ukraine. Now you have to pick through it, as we have all become accustomed to do. Some things you have to take with a grain of salt, or they'll say some outlandish things. So-and-so has been taken out or whatever. Then you got to, get that fact check. But Reddit seems to have some, and I don't know, do you subscribe to Reddit at all? Because I think of you often because a lot of it does come across so raw. They're speaking Ukrainian or Russian, and I have no idea what they're saying, but you can piece together the situation that they're in. But that's where I'm getting some of my news that up until this point, I really didn't pay much attention to that.
Andy, I would say you're very well informed. So that means that whatever you're doing is working. I think that we're lucky enough to live in a world where there's a lot of options that we have. And when I think about Russian people in that setting, it is dreadful because they have really no access to information in Russian. Yes. And most Russian people don't speak anything but Russian. And so they're stuck in this real echo chamber where there's nothing else but like Pravda. And so for us, the fact that we can look at British newspapers and people's blogs and different YouTubes, if we care to find out, and that's always been our strength in the West, is that we've always had more information than interest. But now
where do you go?
Interest,
where do you go?
You know, I read some Russian. I read British stuff. I go to Google News. Trying to think of where. You know what? New York Times and Washington Post and CNN consistently are. It's here's the thing. Usually they cover some other crisis, and then we have to, the people that pay attention to Russia and Ukraine have to rely on like the best we can to find information. But these days we have the best reporters and the best journalists in the world looking at Ukraine and Russia. And so like Daily Beast, for instance, is amazing. They do really that. There's a good source because they have a couple of people that are really good. They have on Twitter, you know, you end up going there because we're on Facebook and I love Facebook. You know, nothing, you know, for or against any billionaire, but I have a soft spot for this platform, but it's just not fast enough. You know, Twitter like is where the news is like developing really fast right now. So it's and then I try to process it and give it out. And then also, I guess I do have a little bit of an insight because I do have guests on my channel that do give me slightly different perspective and more insight. And that's been something that's been really cool because there is like this whole YouTube blogosphere in Russian where you have people who create content by having their own streams or videos of news analysis or whatever. And then some that create content by going around and giving interviews to people. And then that's how they create content. Then so it's like being like booking a band. So I know that these analysts are available if I want to invite them. So I have a Rolodex and then I have the best people. And so thanks to you, I'm able to share some of this information with our listeners tonight. Andy, I am so grateful to you.
Well, it's back at you. Let me just say I'm a Facebooker too. I think it's fun to take a shot at someone in politics and then show a picture of the socks I got for my birthday. It's just kind of a nice thing format to be able to do. You know, Facebook has been criticized and rightfully so, but I still am on there. And if you want, you can go there at Andy Jorgensen, look me up. I'm on Instagram at Stuck with Andy. I'm on Twitter at Stuck with Andy. I don't even know what I am on Reddit. They give you a name there. But what I want to zero it down is what I'm looking at there. And I would love to hear people chime in if they say, Andy, no, that's not a good source. You shouldn't be. But what it is, I looked up on there, it's Our Ukraine. And so that becomes part of your feed. I'm very new to Reddit, so I don't know exactly the rules of the game, but that's what I look at.
Andy, I just love that, you know, because you want to know, so you're digging out there and you're finding stuff and you're good for
doing what I can. And it's probably not right, but it's what I'm doing. But where can we find you, Yuri? Where are you? And you've got this YouTube channel. I'm kind of new to that. I don't really go onto YouTube. I go onto podcasts. But
what I have is it's called Rashkin Report, and at this point it's over 26,000 subscribers, who about 40% of them are in Russia, and we'll see how many more hours of I will have before they shut down YouTube there. And then about 25-30% are in Ukraine, and the rest are Russian speakers all over the world, some even in the United States. So Rashkin Report. Most of the programming is in Russian, but I do try to post some things in English. There's some really fascinating conversations. I hope you will. I always know that if I'm going to do a conversation in English and with a person that knows a lot about Russia, there's probably going to be a lot of heavy Russian accents somewhere in there, and I feel bad because people get tired of listening to difficult accents. But these days, I think the curiosity is exceeding, and our interest is exceeding our struggles with accents. And so there's really great conversations that you can find on Rashkin Report. So I hope you'll check it out. And I will post in description to this video all the links that you can support all the different things in Ukraine and show your support for people of Ukraine. So I don't know what else we can say. Thank you.
Well, I want you to know this. I have about 10 questions all queued up in my head, but I gotta stop this because you and I agreed that before you even did this, we're going to do this for an hour. It's an hour 25 now. So, but I kind of knew in the back of my head that was going to happen. But yeah, I don't know how frequent we're going to do these. I would hope that people, I'll try to do my best at posting it. I know Yuri, you do too, but if we do another one of these, and if you like them, message Yuri, myself, or let us know if this
share the video, let other people know, because the point here is to
that's another thing too. Educate. I mean, we're being very honest. We see things, we know a few things, and I think there is something to be learned from that. Maybe we're wrong, we could be, but
learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. No, and just so you know, I mean, I want to get going on a podcast. I got oh my God, my wife is telling me you bought the equipment. You're not doing it. And I hear about it a lot, and I ought to. But I just had to have it when I bought it. But then, so I'm thinking about a podcast. We hail from Wisconsin, and we could do a whole nother show on that. A lot going on here: investigations, propaganda. We got it all too.
We have elections in Wisconsin still. This is great.
Yeah, some people say they're rigged, but they don't have any evidence. Anyway, it's an interesting time. That's nonetheless, and I just am grateful for friends like you, Yuri, that can help. And that's all this was. It's just two people who know each other, have some of the same concerns. We don't always agree, but we just want to see what the other one knows and be better for it. And that's what this was. So thank you, Yuri.
Thank you, Andy. And we're out.